to the Metro on WDET, Detroit Public Radio. I'm Robin Vincent.
And I'm Tia Graham. Arab Americans have been an important part of the cultural and political landscape of Metro Detroit for decades. Though many have voted for Democrats in recent decades, especially in Dearborn, Arab Americans are not a single-party voting bloc. They are not a monolith. Today, we want to better understand the political future of Arab Americans in Michigan and nationally.
And we want to hear from you. Do Arab Americans have a solid political home in the U.S.? And what are the implications here? The phone lines are open. The number is 313-577-1019. This hour, we'll speak with two Arab Americans who know the Democratic and Republican parties firsthand. But let's start off with our senior producer, David Lyons, to lay some groundwork. Dave, hello. Hi.
Hey, Robin. Hey, Tia.
Hey.
So I'm very interested as an Arab American in talking about this, but why are we talking about Arab Americans in politics today for everyone else who maybe is not Arab American?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, if they've been listening to WDET, they've probably heard a lot of the headlines. There's been a whirlwind of news, honestly, just in the past week alone. There's been foreign policy implications, such as a couple of Metro Detroit mayors who are now named as they're nominated as ambassadors. They'll have to be Senate confirmed by President Trump. They're Arab Americans, which is very notable, from Hamtramck and Dearborn Heights. We've had pro-Palestine protesters who have been arrested and detained, and even having their legal residency status apparently revoked. We've heard about that. That was at Columbia. And we've also heard just today from Amir Makled, one of the attorneys that you spoke with, who is pro bono representing protesters who were arrested and are now charged with felonies for their involvement in the encampment and protests at University of Michigan on the Diag. I'm personally very interested in this because even a decade ago, in really 2017, not quite a decade, I was reporting on divest votes that happened on Ann Arbor's campus at University of Michigan, protests that happened on the Diag, and I can tell you there wasn't a kind of police presence and there weren't arrests like that. It's a slightly different thing. There's always been, protests are protests. I was covering them, and when people protest, they expect some kind of confrontation with whoever is in charge of keeping the order, but it feels a little bit different. It was kind of assumed that free speech is free speech and protesting is protesting. Back then, Student Senate voted yes to divest, which was on the tail end of a very long run of these votes that every year would not pass, and this year it did. So it was kind of like a celebratory moment. That same year, though, a lot of other stuff happened. Dearborn's first Arab American City Council president, Susan DiBaggio, was reelected in that position, and at that victory party was then state rep, now mayor of Dearborn, Abdullah Hammoud. He was young then, he's young now, up-and-comers in the party. But remember, that's the first year of Trump's presidency. We're talking about Muslim bans. We're talking about a totally different feeling and moment in Dearborn and how people felt about President Trump. And we saw in the presidential election just last year that Dearborn showed up and showed out for President Trump largely as a protest vote against the Biden administration's support of the Israel role in the war on Gaza. So all that being said, the political representation of Arab Americans is very important in the United States electorate. It's very important here in Metro Detroit, and things are changing very fast. So we want to talk to people who are on the Republican side, the Democratic side, and better understand where they're at and where Arab Americans are really looking to as a political home nowadays.
And deportations and free speech concerns are really at the center of conversation right now and the center of worries for a lot of people, Arab Americans and much more broadly speaking. Yeah,
they are. I mean, we've heard about Mahmoud Khalil from Columbia University. He's the one who was arrested in his campus housing at Columbia for his involvement in the protests there. He's been transferred to Louisiana and is still there as far as we know, but it's been a big question about, are you allowed to protest and have, a viewpoint that's really not smiled upon by the President of the United States? Usually free speech protects you from those types of things. Now we're wondering what the boundaries are.
Okay, so what else has happened this week?
Well, we have two mayors from Metro Detroit who have been appointed as ambassadors or nominated to be appointed as ambassadors for President Trump. We have Amr Ghalib, who is the Hamtramck mayor, and he is set to be, if confirmed by the Senate, the ambassador to Kuwait. And then we have Bill Bazzi, the mayor of Dearborn Heights, who has been nominated to be the ambassador to, excuse me.
It's
Tunisia.
that time of year. It's that time of year, yeah.
Working on a cough.
Yeah.
So, the ceasefire has fallen apart after Israel launched airstrikes. It is all top of mind, especially in Metro Detroit. So that's what we're working on here today.
Oh, that's a lot, Dave.
Yeah, I know it's a lot of history, but it's important for people to understand that these things don't just happen this week. They happen over a long stretch of time, and even just looking in 10 years, that's a narrow time view of political representation for Arab Americans in Michigan and the United States.
And all of this has us wondering where Arab Americans really go from here. Do they have a solid political home in American politics? We have two great guests today. Hassan Nimi, who's a former coalition vice chair for the Michigan Republican Party. He also ran against Rashida Tlaib in the 12th District. We'll also speak with James Zogby, president and co-founder of the Arab American Institute and chair of the DNC Ethnic Council.
Indeed, we will. So we do want to hear from you right now. Where do Arab Americans go from here? Do they have a solid political home in American politics? We're opening up those phone lines, 313-577-1019. We want to hear from you. And we are on the Metro right now on WDET Public Radio in Detroit. We'll be right back. Back to the Metro on 1019 WDET FM. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent. Today we're asking, is there a political home for Arab Americans? We're asking that question because folks in the Arab community, like people in all communities, have many different experiences and perspectives. But American politics has two prominent parties, and so people have limited choices for where they tend to place their support. Now that President Trump is in office, what do conservative Arab folks in Michigan make of his time? And are they finding the Republican Party warmer, more receptive to their interests than the Democratic one?
To discuss this, we have Hassan Nemi here. He is a former coalition's vice chair for the Michigan Republican Party and a former 12th congressional candidate, where he ran against current Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib. Hassan still does a lot of organizing in our state's Republican Party. Hassan, welcome to the Metro. So I'm going to get this right. Welcome to the Metro. Welcome back to the Metro.
Thank you for having me.
Great to see you. So you grew up in Dearborn to a Muslim father and a Baptist mother. You joined the military in 2012 because you said on WDET a little while back that you wanted to prove that you care about the country. How did your background influence your conservative political leanings?
Well, essentially, it's more of, I say it was my culture and upbringing. Once I understood what the party stood for and read the platforms, it was kind of an easy choice that the Republican Party kind of aligned more with, our values and morals.
Yeah, and oftentimes I think about that, and I just think about same thing for folks in the Black communities. It's like a lot of the times your the way your upbringing aligns a little bit more with a different party. So can you talk about actually standing with what you actually believe in versus doing what you think is what everyone else is doing?
Well, it was more so kind of looking at our community when I wanted to get into politics and see how I can help. And we really realized that one party was we had to pertain, work with them along their lines. But then you saw the Republican Party, it's a lot of free thinkers. So once we got in there, we were able to kind of change the view and give our input, where they kind of welcomed it and went along with it, where we see a lot of like the Democratic political figures from our area, they get along with the left's agenda per se, and then they kind of got to flow with it, where they're not fighting for our community's values. They're kind of just going along with the large plan.
Understood. The Republican Party has been changing over the past decade or so, just like you just said, with the new ideas and open-mindedness. It once stood for restricted government spending and tax cuts. Now, the party seems to be following President Donald Trump and what he says and does. Trump supports tax cuts, but he also is harsher on immigration. How do you think President Trump has changed the Republican Party in that way?
Oh, I think there's a lot of change. If you see, it's more so a complete change. It's more the Republican Party went from like a fiscally Republican Party to now we're looking at conservative values. So, and we're looking at putting our nation first and our citizens first before all the other, the world politics in play per se. So you're seeing a lot of people, we want our civil liberties, our religious freedoms, and Trump was kind of standing up to that. And then we noticed a lot of the corruption that's taking place in a lot of cities across America. And then once you see like Trump's agenda and the Republican agenda are working to try to clean up communities and get the communities to work more for the citizens of the community. So it kind of went hand in hand. You see that shift where the Republican Party now wants to focus more on communities than we're essentially like fiscal Republicans per se.
The button up in the ties. In the run-up to the most recent presidential election, many Arab Americans were upset about the Biden administration's stance towards Israel, which was bombing Gaza with American funding after that country was attacked by Hamas. Now, that led to the Arab majority city of Dearborn residents to vote for Donald Trump over Kamala Harris in 2024. And it was the first time since 2000 that a Republican presidential candidate won that city. Were you surprised at all by Trump's victory?
No, I wouldn't say it was just the issue in Gaza that had to play. It was a lot more, especially in Dearborn, it was the schools. The Republicans and President Trump were standing with trying to push the schools back to the communities to be in charge of it, and then kind of pertaining to our communities where the Democrats were trying to push this, federal education program across the nation, and we were kind of fighting back. So that, I say, was kind of the lead, starting up in our community, because we wanted change. We wanted our schools, our government, and all that to work toward, for our community and our morals and what we want as a community versus, hey, we have to fall in line and play along with this agenda that we don't agree with. You saw a lot of that start from there. And then, obviously, the Gaza played into it and all the other issues.
Some other things. So, but education is mostly controlled at the local level as is. So what exactly were we looking for and what exactly were the concerns there? I know it's very specific when we talk about just Dearborn in general and the population and the community, which if most folks don't know what the community of Dearborn is a large Arab Muslim community. So can you just talk a little bit about those concerns there that were raised that were not being addressed beforehand?
Well, more so, you saw the uprising against the books in schools and what our children are being taught, especially we're talking in middle school, the grades in middle school. So it was a big issue. Our parents stood up and we kind of rallied against that. And you saw that our local government was fighting back against the parents instead of working along. And you think it's supposed to work that your elected officials want your community's best interests at play. And we saw the complete opposite. Our community was standing up saying, hey, we want 1, 2, 3 in our community. And then our elected officials are like, no, that's not what's going to happen. This is what we're standing with. So you saw that kind of clash in between. And then it was a lot of work at the same time. It was a lot of the activists educating our community on how things actually work in our nation. Because you got to remember, a lot of them are first-generation immigrants that still don't understand our process.
Yeah, yes. And recently we've just have so many things happening, of course, but recently Trump has named 2 Arab Michiganders to positions as ambassadors, which I think is very, very new in his country to even hear. But Hamtramck Mayor Amr Ghalib is set to be the ambassador of Kuwait, and then we have Dearborn Heights Mayor Bill Bazzi, who is set to be the ambassador of Tunisia. So we know Arab Americans are not a monolith. We know that. But in your eyes, do you think these were significant decisions by Trump for Arab Americans?
I believe so. At the last 4 years, I'd like to say we've worked closely with the Trump administration, Trump campaign per se, speaking about we want representation, we want a voice in his ear. So when we're making these decisions nationally, you have an Arab American voice to tell you, hey, some of these decisions, this is how it's going to affect the Arab countries or the Arab, civilians. Mm-hmm. So we understand how we're being perceived, across the globe. We're trying to pertain, like the way it looks right now is, we're working very closely with our allies and trying to keep their best interests at play, but we're not really looking at the other neighboring, countries and what's the outcome of our decisions with them. and trying to push to have, people from the community, from the Arab countries, Arab Americans, being able to reach out, speak to the president directly, we can kind of change, give a different view on what some of these decisions can and outcomes can lead to.
A seat at the table. You just want a seat at the table,
essentially,
honestly. And so I want to build on that just a little bit, though, because the importance of having a seat at the table, but oftentimes are we concerned about where these seats are taking us?
Yeah, we can. Yeah, you always have to worry about where they can go and what they're leading to. It's always about staying true to the individual at play. And to me, anybody in politics really has to be the person that's thinking about their community first, not even their name themselves. It has to be literally your community. You're there to represent them. As long as that's happening and we don't get lost in that, it should be a beautiful thing.
And the Republican Party hasn't been without divisions in Michigan. Of course, you stood against Christina Caramo, the former Michigan GOP leader, and she was ousted. But so were you and others who held positions in that power. You critiqued the state Republican Party for being exclusive and Christian nationalist. Do you think that's still an issue right now in the party?
Slightly, yeah. Mm-hmm. We're combating it. I mean, it's like anything else that we deal with. When you're trying to break new ground, there's going to be a lot of work, and it's going to be a back and forth kind of game. When I first got into the Republican Party trying to work, I felt like I was doing an uphill battle both ways, working with the party to accept me and then also working with my community to accept my decision.
Yeah.
And trying to get that going. Moving forward, we're seeing a lot of the party open up and want to kind of get away from that notion and move into including everybody that has conservative minds, but then you still have a large faction that still wants that Christian national movement, and it's going to take some time to work through that.
Yeah, we're going to definitely get more into that. You're listening to The Metro right here on 101.9 WDET FM. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent. We're talking about how Arab Americans have been reacting to the Trump administration's decisions and whether they're finding a more stable home in the Republican Party. Our guest is Hassan Nimi, a Republican Party organizer in Michigan. Hassan, Trump's election is credited with helping strike a ceasefire in Gaza, but that ceasefire was fragile. It's ended just this past week, and another more than 400 Palestinians were killed in Israeli attacks. What's more, Trump has said that he wants to take over Gaza and turn it into a so-called Riviera and forcibly displace Palestinians. What do you make of Trump's actions on Israel and Palestine thus far?
So quite honestly, it's still very vague when you hear of it. We hear all these little talks and we're left to kind of fill in the gaps. And I know myself and my community as a whole, we're all still on our, I'd say on our tippy toes, waiting to understand more of what this process entails. We're worried that if we are relocating them and we have no idea of taking the Palestinians back to Gaza after we rebuild, like we're being told, that seems like it's going to lead to much more issues and conflict in the area. And I'm hoping we get a clearer, idea of the plan, because right now it just seems very vague. And as an Arab American, we're really invested in it.
Did you see what Trump had posted, the AI-generated video of him and Benjamin Netanyahu and their sunbathing in the Gaza Riviera that Trump has created? I mean, I'm wondering how that made you feel to see that.
I saw it. I mean, it was a little different to see because, again, without having the clear idea of what the plan is and then seeing videos like that, it's kind of, I'm just worried that it's going to be detrimental to all the work that we've done, opening up the party and getting a lot of Arab Americans involved. It seems like this issue is very complex, and while all these communities that have a huge stake in the game, I would say, or care very deeply, are kind of left in the dark with a lot of questions left, it just gives us this kind of shaky feeling that we're in right now.
Yeah, there are a lot of things giving us that shaky feeling. I'm also thinking about the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, which has detained and wants to deport Mahmoud Khalil, a Columbia University graduate student, for his role in pro-Palestine protests. And Khalil has a green card. He is a permanent legal resident. He is here legally, are you disappointed with the Trump administration's decision?
With the information given, I would say yeah, but I'd like to hear more because you've heard stories where he's openly, pushing like the Hamas organization versus pro-Palestine. So again, it's another one of those where we need to know more about the story to understand if it was the right decision or wrong. Because there's, certain words will take it down a certain avenue. But it is disheartening when we're protesting, and we saw all these protests, throughout. I mean, all the way from COVID till now, we had protests that some of them were violent, and there wasn't the reaction that we saw like we're seeing with the situation. So it's one of those other things where I feel like the media has been kind of vague on what exactly happened and the reasoning behind the decision. And once we know more, per se.
Well, I don't think it's not the media that's been vague. It's the Trump administration, actually. We are just reporting as much information as we can gather, and the Trump administration has not provided any evidence that Mahmoud Khalil has been a supporter of Hamas. And so I do just want to make that clarification. This doesn't fall on the press for it failing to or omitting information about the situation.
That makes sense. As long as whoever the information is not out there, and until we have it, realistically, it's really hard to come up with like a personal decision of how I feel. Because, like I said, whatever happened could take it two different routes.
Yeah, I mean, I gather from you that you feel a little bit torn. Like you want President Trump to truly be your president, to be a president for Arab Americans, but there are some things happening right now that leave you in a place a little bit of confusion.
Well, with every president that we've had, I believe there's good decisions and decisions that we all don't agree with. I mean, I can't sit here and say like I'm wholeheartedly going to agree with every decision that our president makes, whoever the president is at the time. But yeah, I was hoping once you saw the appointments and the way that we've opened up the party and everything moving forward, you think that our voices are a little bit more recognized or heard. I mean, we have the largest concentration of Arab Americans in the Western Hemisphere located right here.
That's right.
You think we're a little bit more heard. To me, it just doesn't make sense. You have, like we say now, we always talk about data and we talk about, everybody getting all these facts. Well, you have like I said, largest concentration of Arab Americans. I would pull them. A lot of your decisions that you're making in the Middle East and Arab countries, you'd understand the feedback you're going to get over there if you just talk to the Arab Americans that are here.
Right. Hassan, I wonder if that means for you that then you are willing to disagree with or to criticize President Trump, and that would be striking a contrast with many Trump supporters who so far are not willing to go against the president, who are not willing to criticize him when he does something that perhaps they're feeling uncomfortable with.
Well, I'm going to say not necessarily going out against the president. I mean, he's our sitting president. I'm always going to work alongside our president to get what we need to get done. It's more so, like I said, we want a voice that's in the ear of the president. So when there are decisions like this, we'd like to reach out and have a conversation and be like, hey, what are the thoughts? Because like we know, there's a lot of things, especially when you're in leadership, there's a lot of things that are happening that there's so many moving pieces that it's hard to always give all the information to, your communities and the populace. So we were trying to build that network up to the president to be able to speak to him for situations like this, because there's a lot of fallback that can happen from this if it goes the wrong way, especially within our nation, because we opened the doors to something beautiful. We gave a voice to the Arab Americans in our nation, and we shouldn't have them feel like they did all this work and they got activated and they got involved just to be silenced and sidelined again. Like, you'd think that there'd be a little bit more discourse.
So does this mean if you feel that Trump is going to take actions, let's say, in the Middle East that could be really damaging, that could be really detrimental against, let's say, Palestinians or other Arab peoples, would that change where you feel your standing is supporting Trump and would it make you question a little bit the Republican Party, or you feel that this is your party?
No, the Republican Party is definitely my party. I'll say it this way. If you want to join the fight and stand up for your community and you join the Democratic Party, this is how I feel, by the way, but if you join the Democratic Party, it's fall in line. But if you join the Republican Party, like we had 3 Muslims in leadership. Out of the 6 vice chairs, there was 3 of them. We were speaking on behalf of the party, and the party was listening, and then also opening its arms. Like you can get involved in the Republican Party and actually make a change and try to like grow the party and change the idea of the party in a sense to become more evolving. You're not going to get away from the platform per se, but you can open the doors. With the Democratic Party, it's pretty much fall in line, do what you're told, or don't play in the game. So it's, to me, which party falls with my morals and values and which party can I get the Arab Americans more involved in? And in the Republican Party, I feel like we actually have a voice, where with the Democratic Party, it's just fall in line, like you're just part of the train.
So in your eyes, there is the ability to have more of a voice, more nuance. There is room for more nuance in your eyes for Arab Americans in the Republican Party.
Yes, and then also I strongly believe with a lot of my community's morals and values fall in line with the Republican Party. I mean, we're fighting for religious liberties at the end of the day. Arab Americans, especially Muslim Americans, when you talk to them, what is the biggest problem? They're sick of being treated differently or anti-American or not American because of their faith. But we live in the nation, or in a nation where we're known for the freedom of religion. So it's kind of like a hard road to be in and trying to play that game. But one party, like I said, you could make that change to open the door and get that going.
Before we let you go, just one more thing I'd like for us to touch on when it comes to freedom of religion. Political parties are really big. They operate on both state and national levels. You've critiqued former Michigan GOP leader Christina Caramo for being a Christian nationalist and helped to remove her from her position. But you yourself, you were also removed from Coalition's vice chair. Do you think there's still a push in conservative state party politics toward exclusion and Christian nationalism?
Yeah. There's definitely a faction. It's politics. So we went in, we had majority. We kind of did what we thought was right for the election cycle. And while we were working to get President Trump elected, the other side was recruiting, and now they have majority. So it's not like we're not going to sit back and continue to play the same game. We're going to get majority next time it comes. Like I said, with the Republican Party, it's going to be a few years of actually making a change to the party where they are fully inclusive of everybody and kind of sticking to the conservative values versus this Christian nationalist movement. But again, that's not the whole Republican Party, and I don't want to discourage anybody from getting involved. It's a small faction. It's just at this time, while we were all busy getting the election done, they were recruiting, and politics kind of takes play.
Hassan Nimi is an organizer in Michigan's Republican Party. Hassan, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Coming up on the Metro, are you Arab American? We want to know if you feel you've got a political home right here in the state of Michigan, whether it's the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, or the Independent. Let us know, 313-577-1019, 313-577-1019. Stay with us on the Metro. We will be right back.
Welcome back to the Metro on WDET, Detroit Public Radio. I'm Robin Vincent.
And I'm Tia Graham. And many Arab Americans have been reliable Democratic voters, but there's a noticeable movement away from the party over its support of Israel's war on Gaza. But Arab Americans are not a single voting bloc, and they haven't always been Democrats. President Trump won Dearborn on his strong support for Arab American voters, then enraged many of those supporters with his idea to forcibly displace Palestinians and make Gaza, quote, the Riviera of the Middle East, end quote. So, where do Arab Americans go from here? Do they have a solid political home here in American politics? Here to help us understand this question is James Zogby. He's the president and co-founder of the Arab American Institute and a longtime leader in the Democratic Party. James Zogby, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So let's start with how diverse Arab American political affiliations have been over the past few years.
Well, let's go back decades. We've been polling on this since the 90s, so we've got 30 years of data. They've always, like most other ethnic communities, and I mean, you know, the ones that we've polled, which are basically European and then Mediterranean, i.e., Arabs, and we include Greeks in that, and Turks. They lean Democrat and have always leaned Democrat. 2-3 points, sometimes 8-9 points, but never a huge switch until the second Bush administration, when the numbers doubled twice as many Democrats saying they identified Democrat as Republican, and they stayed double until recent years. And that's when the shift came, and it was largely Gaza. And it was interesting because it was across the board. It's a diverse community, 20 plus countries, different generations, different religions. They are about 60-70%, 65% or so Christian. They are largely Lebanese. If you do Lebanon and Syria together, because that's many of them identify in the South as Syrian Lebanese, it's over 50%. But huge numbers, increasingly, from North Africa, from Yemen, from Iraq, not just from the Levant, which is where they were. And so it's a diverse community, but still there are trend lines. And one of the big trend lines had to do with Gaza. When that war broke out, you saw across the board, second, third generation Lebanese Christians, Yemenis, all reacting the same way. It was an interesting phenomenon that it was an issue that unified people. And they no longer identified Democrat. Now, it did not switch fundamentally. There were always 30-something% Republican, even when it was double. The numbers were double. The Democrat numbers were double. The Republican numbers went up. The Democratic numbers went way down. But a lot of those who had been Democrat didn't become Republican. They just simply said no party affiliation, didn't want to identify, or said they were independent. So it's still lean Democrat right now, but it's certainly not what it was during the Obama years or the reaction to Bush, et cetera.
And you are a part of the Democratic Party. In
I am.
2013, you were appointed by then President Barack Obama to the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. You recently ran for vice chair of the Democratic National Committee. Why are you a Democrat?
My mom had the best answer when she was interviewed on Good Morning America. They said, "You're a 86-year-old Catholic lady. Why are you voting for Bill Clinton?" She said, "Because I'm a Democrat." And she said, "What does that mean to you?" And she said, "Look, when my people came here as immigrants, it was the Democratic Party that welcomed us. When labor unions were being formed, it was the Democratic Party that supported us. During the Depression, it was Franklin Roosevelt who lent a hand to those who had needs and didn't focus on the rich, but focused on the working class." And she said, and then the civil rights movement, it was Democrats. And she went on all the way to the present day. And she said, "So I believe that the government has a positive role in people's lives. It should have a positive role. And the Democratic Party has always lent a hand to those who have needs." Lady said, "But you support abortion. Clinton supports abortion and you don't." And she said, "Oh, I know. And I talked to my priest about that. But I talk to my priest about issues like that. But what I want in a president who's somebody I know will care for me in my old age, protect Social Security, protect Medicare, protect the things that people need when they can't meet the needs on their own." So that's, to me, what the Democratic Party is, and it's what the Republican Party isn't. The Democratic Party, has been on the side of people who have needs. Now, look, there's a problem in the Democratic Party today. In my platform, when I ran, I said I'm going to be a pain in the ass, and I've been a pain in the ass in the Democratic Party for 30-something years. And I'm still in, and I'm still going to be a pain in the ass because I've been fighting for Palestine. I've been fighting for issues that other folks in the party don't pay attention to. There needs to be fundamental reform, not just in the Democratic Party, but in the Republican Party. And I have never just gone along to get along. And I started with the Jackson campaign. I was his deputy campaign manager in '84. And I've been a pain ever since.
Hey, James. So I'm thinking about, I love the story. You got it from your mom. A lot of us do get just all types of great stuff from our parents. But the Democratic Party has changed a lot since then, James. I think about it even for myself, and I think about if it reflects some of my goals or characteristics or morals. But it is now known as the party of war. What do you say of that? To that, of course, it still enacts a lot of policies that help a lot of vulnerable people, of course. But this is a different party than it was when your mom was coming up and even when you were coming up.
It's not the party of war. I mean, the probably the most fundamental, transformative moment in American history in this century was the Iraq War and the stupid Afghan War. It was George Bush's war on terror. And Donald Trump can say, I'm the peace candidate, but holy God, I mean, I have to figure out what exactly does peace mean to him. It means surrender. Do what I want you to do, or else I'll punish you. No, the Democratic Party is not the party of war at all. It can be a cowardly party and go along with wars. It can be, as was with Joe Biden, a party that was subservient to Israel. And frankly, he lost that election, this last election, and Kamala Harris refusing to break with him didn't help her at all. But I don't think the Democratic Party is the party of war. I don't believe that. They made a fundamental error going along with Bush, not bucking the what they thought was the mood of the country. It wasn't.
So James, do you think the Democratic Party is sidelining pro-Palestine voters? No. What is true is that the leadership of the party is afraid of the progressive component of the party. But we are the majority. Look at every poll. 2/3 of Democrats at least want to stop aid to Israel, want to stop military support to Israel, oppose Israeli policies. For the first time in polling over the last 3 years since this Gaza war, Democrats have a more favorable attitude toward Palestinians than they do toward Israel. That's where the party base is right now, but you've got a party leadership that is fundamentally afraid of their own base because of money. They're afraid of money being spent against them if they take that position, and that's what's happened. And now we've got the point where you've got Republicans crossing over and creating dark money PACs to fund Democrats who oppose aid to Israel, military aid to Israel, and defeating them. I mean, that's why Jamal Bowman lost. That's why Cory Bush lost. It's no accident that they're going after these folks, but they're using Republican PAC money to do it. That's how shameful it is. And I believe that there's a breaking point coming. I heard your last guest. Yes.
There is a deep debate in the Democratic Party. There is not a deep debate in the Republican Party. 40% of the Republican base is that Christian nationalist crowd that he was talking about. Mm-hmm. And frankly, they've taken deplorable positions, not just on the Middle East, but here at home. Issues that are fundamentally opposed to the values and the needs that Arab Americans have. The only one thing that they've agreed with the Republicans on is the issue of LGBTQ rights. And that is not what defines Islam. That is not what defines Christianity. It is not what defines Judaism. It defines the current Republican Party as this hostility to people who are different in their sexual orientation. And frankly, if that's how Arab Americans are going to decide to vote, they're completely wrong. And what they're doing is turning their backs on their allies in the Black community, in the Hispanic community, in the immigrant community, in the people who have fought and supported us for decades, the only allies that we've had. Turn your back on them because you don't want LGBTQ books in the libraries. Frankly, that's bullshit. I can't support it at all.
Yeah, and it's perfect segue there because we're going to ask about the loss of supporters and voters. The Democratic Party didn't just lose Arab voters; it did also lose Asian American voters, Latino voters, Black voters. The party lost more voters making under $100,000, which is one of the things that they fight for is the working class individuals.
Yep.
So, in general, what do you think Democrats are doing wrong?
Pretty much everything right now on the leadership level. And that was one of the issues that I raised during my run was that we, in presidential campaigns, we become hostage to what I call the consulting class. These are folks who are out of touch with the electorate, have literally no imagination at all, and are never held accountable because they keep getting the jobs. I mean, Ben Rhodes, who was Clinton's national security advisor, one of his advisors said, he used to talk about the foreign policy blob, people that get recycled every 4 years and just keep coming back. And when they're out of office, they're on television and they're always wrong because they just don't understand the world. And they keep saying the same things over and over again. Well, there's this domestic political consultancy blob. They get huge amounts of money. They never lose an election, by the way, because they always make their millions and go home. It's a small cohort of them, maybe 6, 7 groups. They make, like I said, hundreds of millions of dollars during presidential elections, and they spend it on TV ads. They spend it on direct mail, those bizarre, I'm Barack Obama and I need $3 before midnight or else the end of the world is going to come. Mm-hmm. Those things are so annoying and so unproductive, and we've tried to get rid of them, but they still have a stranglehold over the party. And that's what I'm still fighting to break that hold so that actually voters can be heard and not the consultants. Because when decisions get made in campaigns, they don't listen to what voters are saying. They listen to what the consultants tell them. So we wanted to have a Palestinian speaker at the Democratic convention. Oh, no, can't do that. I said, nonsense. We wouldn't lose 5 votes if you had a Palestinian speaker. The Jewish community is not going to be opposed. Now, there'll be some very loud voices in the pro-Israel community, but most American Jews also want to be fair and balanced on Middle East issues. So the problem with the Democratic Party, the reason why it's out of touch is because they've become hostage to this clique of consultants who are, like I said, are out of touch. And they did a convention which focused on joy. And American people weren't feeling joy. They're feeling celebration at our diversity. But American people weren't feeling joy about our diversity. They're upset and angry. 60+% white working class voters have needs that aren't being addressed, and the Democratic Party has turned away from them. Now, the Republican Party says, we care about you. Donald Trump says, I'm going to fight for you. I'm the only one who will. But then what he ends up doing is screwing them royally, because for Republicans, those social issues that they elevate, gay rights or gun rights or this rights or that, those things are, one Republican speaker, leader, was on a TV show I used to have back in the, stopped in 2011, but it was during the 2004 campaign. He was talking about all these issues that are the key Republican issues. And I said, taxes and small government. I said, but you haven't mentioned issues about gays and whatever. And he said, those are just shiny objects we wave in front of people to get them to vote for us. And that is the way they operate. Yep.
James, this is Robin Vincent jumping in because I want to speed us up back into the present moment.
Yes,
and that's okay. That's okay. It's good for us to reflect and also think about how we got here. So, of course, we appreciate that reflection. But I want to look at after Trump took office and the fragile ceasefire that there was between Israel and Hamas. That came to an end this week when Israel launched surprise attacks in Gaza. and killing over 400 people and injuring hundreds more. And this has reignited the deadly war that the United Nations calls a genocide. And what's more, the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, has detained and wants to deport Mahmoud Khalil, a Columbia University graduate student, for his role in pro-Palestinian protests. They claim that he is somehow connected to Hamas, and they have shown no evidence of this. Do you think Democrats should take a stronger pro-Palestinian stance? Do you think that is an opening for them, that this is an opening right now that they could grab?
Absolutely. And we're pushing them to do it. We've gotten some letters from members of Congress, not enough. One is circulating the Senate. The House one did pretty well. Elected officials are cowards. Honest to God, that's the truth. Very few courageous ones. There are Bernie Sanders, and there are AOCs, and there are Dick Durbins, and there are Chris Murphys, but there are not enough of them. And what they need is the backbone that they'll get from listening to a movement of protest. And that's why our goal right now has to be to build a broad-based movement of protest.
Well, and
to demand people do the right thing.
James, when we're talking about Democrats with a backbone, what I'm hearing when it comes to those who don't necessarily have a backbone, according to critics, according to some of these more progressive Democrats, it's Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer out of New York. He got a lot of House Democrats upset after he supported a Republican funding bill to keep the government from shutting down. And that was after he said, and House Democrats said, that they would not support it. And now many Democrats are calling for him to step down. Even moderate former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has criticized Schumer. Do you think Schumer should step down as Senate Minority Leader? And
yes.
Go ahead. Yes.
Yes.
Need
I say more?
Well, you have so many words for everything else we've talked about. I wondered.
The point is that the party needs leadership. Leadership people can believe in, and we just don't have it in the personage of Chuck Schumer right now. He's an inside baseball guy, and people right now need leadership on the outside. They need to feel inspired, and they're just not getting it.
Let's stay on that topic if we could for a moment. Forgive me for jumping in just because we're running out of time. Tell me specifically, what kinds of leaders do you think the Democrats need right now?
Okay, I'm going to say like Bernie Sanders, somebody who can go to working class voters and say, I get you, I understand you, we have made mistakes, trust us, we'll fix it. And they have to identify with the anger that people feel, the sense of social dislocation that people feel, the sense of fear about the economy that people feel. And then they have to propose real solutions that people can understand, not stuff that only folks who read the financial page on the Wall Street Journal can understand. And that's what's needed. I mean, Donald Trump had simple language. His heart was never in the reforms he kept talking about. And we're seeing it now play out in terms of the Republican budget proposal. But Democrats have had the right message, but they haven't been projecting it in an intense enough way to make people believe it. And they haven't done anything about it when they're in office. They've operated in a very cowardly way. We need courageous leadership is what we need.
House Democrats often win competitive seats and they're more moderate. Why do you think they keep winning if people are also upset with so-called moderates?
Well, look, most of the districts we have in the country are not even competitive at all. Gerrymandering's taking care of that. 95% are really not even competitive. There's a handful that are. And I don't believe that moderate, quote unquote, is defined correctly. I don't think that we ought to be focusing our message on social issues or cultural issues, as important as they are. And frankly, I will fight for gay rights as much as anybody, but that's not the issue that we ought to be running an election on. People want to run an election on who's out to help you, who's out to screw you. Is the Republican budget going to help you or screw you? Is the Republican budget or the Republican approach to immigration going to help you, or is it going to make life difficult for you? Is the Republican approach to education, is it for you or against you? I mean, is what we need more vouchers, or do we need a public education system that works for everybody? Do we need Medicare and Medicaid gutted? Do we need Social Security threatened? Those are issues that we can run on and win, but we've got to tell people we care about them, and we don't do it. We just don't do it. We focus on issues. Republicans make these social issues front and center. We bite the bait and go after them. Meanwhile, they're focused on the cultural issues, but when they're in office, they're screwing people with budgets and proposals that actually hurt them.
James, we're going to have to leave it right there. We are out of time. James Zogby.
I get passionate, don't I?
Just a little. That's good. We like passion on this show. President and co-founder of the Arab American Institute and longtime leader in the Democratic Party. Thank you so much for joining us on the Metro.
Thank you for having me.
The Metro is produced by Sam Corey, Carey Jr. II, and Jack Philbrandt. Our engineer is Nate Bender. Our senior producer is David Lyons. The Metro is a production of WDET, a listener-supported service of Wayne State University. This is WDET-FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation.